I describe being an agent as one third therapist, one third lawyer, one third editor. And that's what it feels like. The therapy I do with my writers can't be underestimated.
What's good? I'm Nikesha Elise Williams, and this is Black and Published on the Mahogany Books Podcast Network, bringing you the journeys of writers, poets, playwrights, and storytellers of all kinds. We are still in the Seven Daughters of Dupree takeover. That's my forthcoming novel, which is available for pre-order everywhere you get your books and will be published January 27th, 2026. And so today's guest is my literary agent, Peter Steinberg. Peter has been an agent since 1996, just before email was in vogue. But as the publishing industry has shifted with the advent of the internet, Peter says one thing remains the same.
If you're a fiction writer listening to this, I wouldn't worry so much about your social media. You worry about writing a great book because that sort of like supersedes everything else.
Writing a great book takes time, but publishing is all about taking advantage of an opportunity with maybe more than just a little bit of luck in an industry built on rejection.
Basically, publishing is a chain of passes. Like the boss passes on the editor passes on me, I pass on the writer. But then you have success within that.
In our conversation, Peter explains how he accidentally fell into his adult career after moonlighting as a screenwriter. Plus, what he believes is the death of good fiction, and why the time of year sometimes does really matter when you go on submission. That and more is next, when Black and Published continues. So Peter, what made you want to go into being a literary agent?
I was a huge reader my whole life. I was a shy kid. My sister describes our childhood as my door closed. So, I was just in my room reading. Loved reading. It was my everything. I just went from one book to another. I also loved movies. Saw every movie I could. I decided to go to film school at NYU. Went there, loved making movies, graduated from there, didn't know a soul in the movie business, didn't know how to get into the business. I decided to work a temp job and write screenplays. So I was basically barely doing any work for the temp jobs and writing my screenplays at the office. And I thought I was a genius. Like I'm being paid to write screenplays. I
Always
decided,
a hustle.
yeah, always the hustle. But I didn't know what to do with the screenplays when I would finish them. I didn't know anyone. I couldn't really break in. There was a few people I knew, and they gave me advice to revise the screenplays into things I didn't even want to do. So I was feeling a bit lost. I also didn't love writing screenplays. The form is kind of boring. Like it's sort of like you want a house, but you just have the blueprint for a house, you know?
Okay.
So then what happened was I got married and I was still temping and I was like, this is depressing. I can't be a married temp. So I have to grow up, get a real job, blah, blah, blah. And I never thought I could work in an office. Like I just wasn't an office person. I pictured myself on sets and things like that. But at that time I happened to be temping at HarperCollins. And then, and I was really intrigued because writers would call on the phone. You get to talk to famous writers. And it was something I hadn't really thought about before because I love books. But I thought, what's the big deal? Like someone writes them, they figure out the cover, and then they ship them to the bookstores. Little did I know there's so much behind it, like any business.
What year was
Um,
this?
this was 1996.
Okay.
So I decided okay, I'm going to be an assistant editor at a publishing house. There weren't any openings, but there was an opening at a literary agency, and I barely even knew what that was. But I went for the interview. It was like old school, cats in the office, manuscripts piled everywhere, people smoking on the phone, windows shut, really smoky office.
Okay, New York in the 90s. Okay, I got it.
Yeah, yeah. It was a tiny bit pre-email, or email was there, but no one was really using it yet. And the phone was ringing off the hook. So I got the job. And so I started working at this literary agency. So I had a real job. I stopped temping. I was still sort of writing screenplays, but not really. And then, little did I know it was this famous agency called Donadio and Ashworth. Candidate Donadio was the it agent of like the 70s and 80s. She was still alive. She was retired, but I used to talk to her on the phone a lot when I have questions to ask her and stuff. But she found Catch 22 on the slush pile. She represented Mario Puzo, who wrote The Godfather, and Peter Matheson, and Robert Stone, and Kathleen Shine. Gravity's Rainbow. She won the National Book Award with Thomas Pynchon. It was like a who's who of famous writers of that time. Studs Terkel, she represented. I used to talk to him on the phone. Edward Gorey, the famous illustrator. So like it was really cool to like catch some of those people at the end of their lives. Many of them passed away while I was working there because it was sort of that generation.
Hmm.
But I started like understanding what a literary agency was and what they did, and it was very intriguing to me. They participated in doing film rights for the book, so I still felt like I had a toe in the movie business, which I loved. And then about 3 years in, and I noticed this with other assistants at agencies, about 3 years in, it sort of clicks. You're like, oh, I get this. I understand what being an agent is. I know how to sell books. And then I sold my first book in 1999.
So you stumbled into being a literary agent like by accident.
Yeah, and most agents do because most people don't go to college going like I'm going to be a literary agent. They either go for English or
Hmm.
like or they want to be a writer themselves and sort of like fall into it just to make money.
And so you say at about the 3 year mark, it clicks about what it is that an agent does, and you sold your first book in 1999. What exactly does an agent do, and what is a literary agency?
Wow. Okay. A literary agent is a advocate for the writer. They take the writer's side in all things. I describe being an agent as one third therapist, one third lawyer, one third editor. And that's what it feels like. The therapy I do with my writers can't be underestimated. I do a ton of that kind of stuff. But I'm the writer's advocate. I'm on the writer's side. The publisher wants to do the book, but they want to pay as little as possible because it's a business and they want to make money. So it's my job to get as much money for the author, be their advocate. A lot of times it's their first rodeo, it's the first time they're doing this. And I've done many books, so I know exactly what to expect. From the publisher side, they like having agents because a lot of them are newbies and they don't understand how the business works. So I'm sort of there guiding the way. So there's a shorthand like in any business, and editors appreciate that I'm sort of helping the writer sort of understand how this all works.
Hmm.
And a literary agency is a place where agents work. I work at an agency right now called United Talent Agency, or UTA. It's a big entertainment agency. So I think there's like 2,500 employees or so. I'm in the New York office. There's about like 350 agents in the New York office. And then we have a book division within that. So I think there's like 18 agents or so in the book division at UTA, and we all work on book things. We help with the movie rights, but it's our job is primarily getting material in, making it as good as it can be once we decide to work with the author, and then submitting it to editors that we know, that we have relationships with, that we've worked on over the years. And the job is to get the editor excited about the material.
So you've been a literary agent going on 30 years. And you being at UTA is a recent development that coincides with how we got together to work together. What can you say before we get into that specific story? What can you say about what is the difference between a talent agency such as UTA, which is one of like the big three among CAA and William Morris,
WME, yeah, WME.
William Morris Endeavor, and just being at a literary agency like where you first started off in the 90s?
By its very nature, UT is a little more corporate. It's run like a bigger company. But I think essentially it's the same thing in a lot of ways because, as you know, like it's about the relationship between the agent and the writer. And that sort of never changes no matter where you are. And that it's about like the material and what you work on. So I try to focus in on that. The entertainment agency part is sort of like the bells and whistles, the gravy, the extra stuff that, can come in handy. Like, for example, you have a book, a novel, and you think it could be a movie. We have a division at UTA called Media Rights where they do book to film stuff. So, like, that's a bell and whistle. I can get the book to some famous people. Who knows if they'll actually read it, but we can at least get it in their hands, and have it sitting on their table, and maybe they'll pick it up when they're bored.
All right. So then let's get to our connection. Do you remember our first interaction?
I thought it was over Twitter, but you reminded me that an agent introduced us before that, right?
So that agent would be Jess Regal. She never introduced us. She passed me your name. But so our very first interaction was over Twitter. And
Okay, that's what it was.
yeah, I remember being on Twitter pre Elon talking about getting ready to query. And you responded and said, "Hey, I would love to see it." And I didn't like, what was your algorithm doing at that time? Because we weren't following each
I
other.
think I think it was through Jen Baker, because like I
Oh,
followed her, and I believe she retweeted it. I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think that's what happened. But we have a mutual friend named Jen Baker, and she retweeted you. And I just happened to be on my phone on Twitter at that very moment, and I always say like send it to me because you never know. Like
mm-hmm.
you know. 999 out of 1,000 times the material won't be what I would work on you
Okay.
know so but I always do it because like there's a very small chance that the material will be good. So I saw you tweet that, and I also, it's really important to me that like people have access to publishing. Like it's
Mm,
one of the most important things. We're not in some ivory tower. We're not in some like cordoned off place where you can't get access, because like it doesn't happen that often. But I have found some of the best work just, completely cold. And I also want to think that you can get in if you're talented. So, like, for example, like we have something called the unsolicited pile, which it just means that people that don't know me at all, it's not a friend of a friend, it's not a referral. They're just coming to me cold. And I look at that almost every day. I look at it closely. I don't have an assistant look at it, because it's like super important to me that anyone can sort of get in.
mm. So I didn't know that Jen had retweeted it. Shouts to Jen Baker. She was on the podcast for her book, Forgive Me Not, a couple years ago, and then we worked together. But I think this also goes to your credit because before you ever responded, send it to me, your name had been passed to me twice. And so your reputation has preceded you.
That's
And
nice.
so when
Nice.
I saw you respond, I DM'd you and I was like, "Hey, I already had your name. You were already on the list. This is the email I have." And you were like, "No, send it to this address."
And
And
it was only like a few months after I started at UTA, I think.
no, it was before. It was when you were still with Fletcher and Company,
That's right.
which was a boutique agency, I guess.
Yeah, basically what happened was I was working at an agency called Fletcher and Company, and then UTA bought the whole agency, and that was the beginning of 2023.
Yeah,
Um,
because I queried around November of 22. And then I don't know if you remember this because I saw you online again in January of 23. And you talking about, "Oh, I love my job." And I was like, "I hope you love my book as much as you love
oh
your
yeah, I
job."
do remember. Now I remember that. Yes, that
And I
was
was like,
funny.
I may have either like really pissed him off or
No,
he's
that
gonna
was
think it's
that was.
cute.
I laughed. I remember that. Yes.
Because I think I put at the bottom runs out of Twitter with the like the running emojis so that you would kind of get that I was joking, but like not really.
And I told you I moved agencies, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so then you DM'd me. I was like, "Hey, I still have it. I'm gonna read it. We just went through a merger." And you sent me the link to the New York Times article about UTA buying Fletcher
Ah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Co.
was trying to impress you. Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, thank you." And I was like, "Okay, I didn't just like ruin my chances here." So this is something I've never asked. When you read Seven Daughters, you responded to me cold. I was coming to you kind of unsolicited. What was your impression or what did you think going in when you sit down to read a manuscript from someone that you don't know? How do you approach that?
I just try to approach it very, very simply and open-mindedly. Like, when you're in a bookstore and you like open a book and start reading it, I
Mm-hmm.
try to think of it in a very binary way, like either I like it or I don't. I try not to put all the stuff I know about publishing on top of it. I try not to bring my baggage to it. I just try to really, I mean, it's hard sometimes, but to sort of clear your mind and just start reading,
Mm-hmm.
and either you like it or you don't like it. And that's sort of like what I tell people starting in publishing, is sort of like put all of your sort of things aside that you bring to the work, and just sort of like, just like any book, like, do you like it or you don't? It almost seems like it's a decision not made by you, It's
Mm.
almost like eating food and you're like, you like the food or you don't like the food. It's not like something you can control really. I mean, I'm sure taste changed over time, but in that moment, it's either you like it or you don't. And I started reading your book and I just fell into it, and I was very impressed. The thing I remember most of all is that your book covers, it's called Seven Daughters of Dupree, and it covers seven generations. So that kind of book is very hard to do well because sometimes when you write about a large chunk of time, things can be written in summary. Like
Mm.
just to get it all in there, writers sometimes summarize, and summary is like the death of good fiction. It's all about specifics. So, like, not only did you do a big chunk of time well, it like blew me away. And I started thinking about, I think when you start thinking about your own personal life, the novel has you. Because I start thinking about my generations and what time does. And if you're dealing with seven generations, the last generation doesn't remember the first, but elements of it still pass down. And I think novels are the best form to do that kind of theme well, because you can see like a huge swath of time that you can't see in real life.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be very powerful. And it was sort of like maybe the best book I've read that did that, and that's why I was so excited about it.
Thank you. I did not pay him to say that. um, so then you talk about, reading a book and putting all of your baggage or everything that you know about the industry aside. When you read a book that you like, after you read it, do you then take into consideration whether or not you think you can sell it?
Yes. That sort of comes in after I start thinking about like how can I angle this? How can I pitch it? How can I sell it? Also, what material needs work. If I'm reading something and I know exactly what to suggest to the author for their rewrite, I think I'm the agent for it. Like if I can see it, I can see what needs work and I can work with the author. It's my job to pitch it. I'm always spinning things. I guess another way to describe being a literary agent is the way in which I convey information.
Mm-hmm.
Conveying information is extraordinarily important when I convey it to editors, like the way I say things to them. And after I finish a book, I start thinking about all of those things. But I think the most important thing in publishing is passion and a love for the material. So that supersedes everything else. And editors are very intuitive and good at seeing that agents, you can't really fake it. Like either you're into it or you're not. And if you're very excited about a piece of fiction, editors can tell.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the greatest spin of them all. Like your excitement for the material, because people publishing are jaded, they're cynical. It's a big slog and there's so much to read. So when you get very excited about something, editors get excited in turn. And
Mm-hmm.
I think my personality works well with being an agent because I'm sort of very hyperbolic. I like really love things and I want to tell the world. And I mean it in the moment. Like if I eat a cheeseburger, I'm like, this is the best cheeseburger I've ever had. You have to have it. And I do that to books too. And I think editors sort of respond to that.
But before you get to the editor, you first have to convince the author or set up the author call. How do you go about that? And then, like, what is the feeling when you're setting that up?
It's sometimes fraught. The hard thing is I don't know the person. It's sort of a cold call. But I think one thing I've learned over the years is you sort of get to know the person through their material. So I think by reading your book, I sort of knew you a little bit. So I like to use the things that I learn about the person on the call. I'm very complimentary on the call because I wouldn't be doing the call otherwise. So I'm sure that helps. I also like to talk about it, give my editorial feedback on that call too, because the more I do this, the more I realize that writing is rewriting. And I want to make sure that the writer is open to rewrites. I think that if I do a call and the writer said, no, my way or the highway, I probably won't want to work with that author because it's indicative that the relationship might not go well because there has to be a flexibility there. There has to be a back and forth. Writers don't write books in a vacuum. And I describe the author agent relationship as friend adjacent. We're not friends, but it's very close to being friends. And
Mm-hmm.
working on books takes years. You can't fake it. You have to feel like you can work with that person for years. And I think that initial call with the authors is me sussing that out if it's someone I can work with for a long time.
I remember on our call, and I've told you this before, and I've said it to the audience in the last episode, that, the day that we had our call was the day that my divorce was finalized. So my mind was like, yeah, 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 I have this call. And I remember you being very complimentary of the book, but I still didn't know what was happening.
Like
Like,
you were having trouble taking it in.
honestly, I remember I had picked up my kids from school, and I think my son was doing his homework, and I may have given my daughter my iPad so that she would like be quiet for a bit. And I closed my door. And so I'm sitting in my room on my bed. We're on the phone and I'm listening. And you're telling me, and like you were gushing about the book. And like I felt really good, but I didn't know what was happening. And I think we got like 45 minutes into the conversation. And then you were like, yeah, so I'd like to offer you representation. And I was floored. I don't know if you, what sense did you get from that call? Because I was out of it.
I wasn't sure if you were going to pick me. Like, I wasn't, if you felt a little bit like you were weighing your decision carefully, which I respected, but it made me a little bit nervous that you wouldn't go with me. And I felt like I had to work with you. I felt very strongly about it. And I think if you decided not to go with me, I would have been a little bit devastated. I would have gotten over it like you do, but it would have hurt.
Because I remember in waiting to hear back from you, and I am not a patient person at all. So, like, in the midst of like all of this waiting, I had seen the AWP writer to agent program. And so I had submitted for it. And I think maybe a few days before we had our call, I got an email saying that an agent from that program was interested in the book. So I was like, oh my God, he's offering me representation. That's so amazing. But I've always heard you don't take the first offer that you get. So I put you off for like 2 weeks.
Yeah, it's like buying a house. Like you're not going to buy the first house that you see. That would be irresponsible.
Yeah. And so then when I finally said, let's work together, it was March 15th or something like that. I was at South by Southwest for a job thing in a hotel. And then we got on the phone and we started going through your editorial feedback and what you thought needed to happen in order to like get the book to editors and how quickly and the timeline. What is your process, I guess, for getting authors ready to go on submission? Because I felt like we went really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I usually it's like 3 rounds, and it usually takes like 2 months or something like that. I can't remember how long it took for us, but usually I give my big notes first, and then the author spends some time rewriting it. Then I give, I say something like, this is fantastic. This, and this still need to be fixed. And then there's sort of a minor rewrite, and then the third one is just the final little odds and ends. And that's usually how it goes. And then as you're rewriting, I'm pitching it to editors. So I have lunch with editors or I have another book with them and then I say at the end of the call, "Hey, by the way, I'm sending you this other book." So I'm doing my job priming the pump for the editors as you're rewriting because it's so important that they're excited about it when they get it in. They've been waiting,
Mm-hmm.
for it.
How do you build your list of who to submit the book to?
It's usually a mixture of people I know and new editors. I like to think there's the perfect submission list where it's the exact right editors that you should be sending to. Sometimes I'm wrong, but I like to think that I get very close each time. You have long-term relationships with these editors and you sort of know their taste. And also, the publishing house positions them in the way that, this is the right editor for this kind of material. So it feels fairly easy to me to make the list. And I like to mix it up with some young editors because there's some people I don't know. And one of the good things about submitting to younger editors is I get to know them.
Mm.
And there's a few editors sometimes I submit And I know that they'll probably won't offer for this book, but it's a little bit about relationship building for the next book too. So I sort of factor all of those things in. And then sometimes it's real life. People are on vacation, people are on maternity leave, people are away. There's editors who like in theory would buy the book, but they just bought a very similar book the week before, so they can't, or their boss secretly told them don't buy any more books, but they can't tell me, stuff like that. So
Wow,
those
that
things factor.
happens.
I think so. I still don't know for sure. I think they sometimes run, some of the publishers sometimes run out of money or like towards the end of the year, like they have the yearly budget. Because
Hmm.
sometimes editors go like, maybe you should submit that to me in January. Like when the budgets start over.
In the new fiscal year when
Yeah,
I have money
exactly.
to spend.
Exactly.
So then when you were building my list and we were talking about being ready to go on submission, you were adamant that we had to go in May, which I think why we worked so quickly, because you didn't want to let the summer come when like publishing allegedly shuts down for the summer and no one's working until they come back in September for the fall and then everybody's working on like the big books for award season. And building my list and going on submission, we went on a Tuesday and we had our first editorial call came in for like the next week. What is the general timeline that you give or that is like ideal for a book to be on submission before you know if it's going to be picked up or not?
I would say 2 or 3 weeks, you start getting a sense of the dynamic of the submission. It goes faster than it used to because I think editors get so many submissions from agents. I think, like, on average, they're getting like 30 submissions a week from agents. So just imagine being that editor. And these are
Yeah.
like real submissions from like real agents. And I think there's a little bit of like, you have to sort of like decide quickly and move on. I was hanging out with some editors and they were just sort of talking to each other. I heard them say that they decide like right away, right when it's submitted, basically. Like they read my cover letter and they're like, of course they have to read the material if they like it, but they sort of like make that decision very quickly, whether they're into something or not. And it's just sort of like that's what they have to do to survive. But yeah, it's usually 2 or 3 weeks. I get a sense of stuff. After 3 weeks and there's no interest, I start getting a little bit nervous because what happens is editors think if no one is interested, why would I be interested? So
Mm.
like there's a bit of a herd mentality. And, I use that to my benefit when there is interest. And I say, like, to other editors, look, these two editors are interested. Aren't you interested too? But like it can go in a negative way where there's no interest and then it breeds even less interest because they're
Mm.
just assuming that it's not good because no one's interested. But what happens is it's annoying to me. Sometimes editors wait for other editors to be interested. So if all editors wait for other editors to be interested and everyone's just waiting on everyone else. So I love the editors who just sort of like don't wait for anything and just say like I love this, because then they're a little bit more like me, where I sort of, you take a chance on something. You don't wait for the group to affirm it. You just are moved by it and then want to work on it.
Would you say my editor, Allison Callahan at Scout Press at Gallery Simon and Schuster, was an editor who didn't wait and just was like very, I love this.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories ever because no editor had ever done this to me. I was sitting on my couch, like I think it was like 9:30 at night or something, just looking at my phone or whatever. And then she like I think she emailed me and said like, "Oh my God, this book is incredible. I have to have it," or something. "Are you free for lunch tomorrow?" So like I was really taken aback because I don't think an editor has ever asked me to lunch during the submission process.
Really?
Yeah, so it's really unusual. And I've been told the story to other editors and they're like, I should do that. But I could tell she'd like read the last page of your book like 30 seconds before she sent me the email. I could just tell like she put it down and then just emailed me. And I just happened to be free the next day. Like I didn't have a lunch, I didn't have a meeting. And I was like, so I just looked at my calendar. I was like, yeah, I can have lunch. So we went to lunch while it was on submission, which I was just excited about it because basically what she was doing is putting her cards on the table. She wasn't playing the game of
Mm-hmm.
like pretending she kind of liked it to like give you less money. She was like saying like I have to have this. What will it cost? So
Mm.
that's a great thing as an agent. That's what you dream of, that editors will do that. and they
As a
won't be
writer, that's what you
coy.
dream of, even if you didn't
Yeah,
know that that's what you were dreaming of.
exactly. So we went to lunch the next day, and she's like, Peter, I'm literally shaking right now. I have to have this book. It's like the best thing I've read in years. And so we just talked about like, because she was dying to, like when you read a good book, like you want to talk to your friend about it who has also read it so you can like break it down. It was the same kind of thing where she had no one she knew had read it except me. So like we just talked about the content and the story and what was working and stuff and why it was so good. So like that lunch really influenced me. It was smart of her because like it made me want to give her the book and sort of like have it go in her direction. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but I could tell that she would do everything in her power to get the book.
So yeah, I remember we spoke that next week, so like the second week of May, on a Monday morning, because I had my first editorial call that Tuesday. And I remember we spoke early that morning. You told me about Allison emailing you and that you guys were going to lunch. And then I think by the end of that Monday, I went from one editorial call on the Tuesday to like 9 set up for the week. And I was like, oh my God, the inbox is full. Like there's a whole post on my Instagram page about it. Like I don't say specifically, but that's what was happening. And then I did the first call on the Tuesday. And then I talked to Allison on Wednesday. And I want to say maybe a couple of hours after we hung up, she offered a preempt. Is that normal?
No, it's not normal. I mean, it's what you hope, but it was going much faster than the way things usually go. Usually, you work towards an auction,
Mm.
meaning you have a few editors interested and they bid against each other, which can be advantageous. But like I said, because Allison like put her cards on the table and said, I will have this book no matter what the cost, the game was put aside and
Mm.
I just focused in on her. But then there was another editor at Simon and Schuster who was also interested. And what happens there is you have to decide, they make sort of a house bid, meaning like each publishing house has imprints. So like if there's more than one imprint, a lot of the times they make a house bid. So it's like one offer from the publishing house and you have to decide which editor you want to go with. And I know that was a bit of a fraught decision for you.
Yes, that's exactly what happened to me. Peter earned every bit of his commission and his percentage on this deal with the negotiating. And I think at the end of that Wednesday, like you were like, your money's not going to change. You just have to decide who you want to work with. You have one more call tomorrow with the other Simon and Schuster team. And I didn't know what to expect. Like I'm doing this podcast and having talked to so many authors, indie and traditional, big five and independent presses. I'd heard people who had been on submission for a year, other people that had been on submission for months. And so this was happening like within the space of like a week. You went on submission on a Tuesday, and then Wednesday, the next week, the offer was done. And I just had to make a choice. And I was like, what is my life? um, and that call with the other Simon and Schuster team, it wasn't just like a phone call, it was a Zoom call, and we were all there on camera. What was your impression of that? Again, is that normal? Because I don't know.
It's unusual that like multiple people at the same house are sort of like vying for your book, and it's a great place to be in. It doesn't happen that often, but it's like, I don't know, it's really sexy. It's like it's like what you dream of happening and it happened to you. And I think I said at the time like you can't really make a wrong decision here because both Allison and the other editor are both amazing editors. So it was more about your personal feeling, your intuition, the vibe you feel towards the person, and what your instincts say. And do I have this right that you picked Allison in part because of her name?
Yeah. So that story is after we met with the other team on that Thursday, you said to me, so who do you want to work with? And I was like, I don't know. Like, what kind of question is that? We just got off the phone. We just got off the Zoom. I have no idea. And you're like, well, you need to make a decision. And I was like, okay. It was Thursday. So I was like, I'll tell you by Friday at noon. And all that
Which I loved because like you gave me a little deadline like and I think you told me at noon or like at 11:59.
was
Like it
like,
was so dramatic.
because that Friday I had a meeting for my job at 12. So I was like, well, I definitely need to make a decision before I go into this meeting. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to work. So I was like, all right, I'll tell you by Friday at noon. And so, like, that Thursday, what did I do? I don't remember what the rest of my work day looked like. It was a Thursday, so my children were with my co-parent. And so I had the day to myself. And all I did was think and then weigh options. I called Jen Baker to help me. I phoned a friend. I called Jen. She helped me think through it. I called another friend who helped me think through it. I did yoga. And when I did my editorial call with Allison, she told me that she did yoga. So, like, that was in my mind. But the other thing that I did was, everyone knows I'm a big Janet Jackson fan. I was watching old concert videos of her on YouTube because I had gone to her show like in April of that year when she had gone back out on tour with the Together Again tour. That was kind of like how I celebrated, getting an agent and also being divorced. um, and so I was in deep in my like Janet rabbit hole watching videos, and one of her dancers is named Allison, and the dancer is this beautiful dark-skinned Black woman who's also full figure, so she always stood out on stage. But she also was always dancing her ass off. But her name is Allison, so like that was in my mind. And then doing yoga in the morning, Allison was in my mind. And I remember sending you the email hedging because I still hadn't made a decision. And then something just was like, it's Allison. And I think that's how I ended the email to you.
Honestly, I would have been fine with any decision because it's your decision to make. But I was sort of secretly happy you went with Allison because, like, the whole like taking me to lunch story works better if you go with the publisher. So, like, I just wanted her like move there to work on us. And I think it did. And I think that we did go with the right editor, and I think it's worked out for the best.
And that was also the thing in my mind, just as an author deciding, because you had told me about her taking you to lunch. She was very effusive on our call when we did the editorial call. And then she was the one who made the preemptive offer. And I was like, we're only here because of her. So it has to be her. And so, like, that was kind of like my thing.
Yeah, exactly. And she was very dramatic. She would say stuff to her boss like, "I will die if I don't have this book." And I don't know, she just like
She
really
is very
went.
dramatic.
She went there, and I appreciated it. You know.
Me too. Do you have any questions for me about the process?
How has it been different than what you thought it would be? Like before you worked with a big publisher, did you have certain sort of expectations of what it would be like? And how is it different than what you originally thought?
Oh gosh. I think when I was trying to get an agent and be with a big publisher, when I self-published my first novel, the experience that I had now is what I had always dreamed of. But by the time I got to it with the Seven Daughters of Dupree, I had been indie for so long. I had done the university press book with Mardi Gras Indians, and then doing this podcast, having heard so many different kinds of stories. I didn't know what to expect. I honestly didn't. I was like, it could sell in a day, it could sell in a week, it could sell in a year. Who knows? Like, my big win was like getting the agent because that was all I had wanted for so long. And then signing with you was it wasn't necessarily bittersweet, but it was like very significant just of how it happened coming out of my marriage. And then, all the dreams that I had ever wanted to come true that I thought would save my marriage happening on the other side of it. And so it was like this experience, especially as it was happening, was like life was happening to me in so many good ways. And I was just trying to hold on to it because I didn't know what was going to happen next. And so, yes, it's like all the dreams that I had ever had from like 2015, but having them happen when I'm a bit older, I've had more experiences in writing and around publishing, even though it wasn't at this level, has just made it like, oh, these things really do happen. They don't happen to everyone. And so it is special, it is rare. And that's regardless of race. And that's a whole other kind of conversation. But that it does happen and it can happen. So someone like me, that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And that's not uncommon. A lot of my fiction writers say, like, my first few books that I wrote, I thought they should be published in a big way. I thought I should be very successful right out of the gate. But I'm so glad that I wasn't because, like, it took me a little while to become a great writer. And it took me a little while to have life experience, to have things to write about. You know, it's a
Mm-hmm.
bit of a catch-22 with fiction because it's like you have that desire to write about things, but sometimes you're not quite mature enough or have lived enough of a life to be able to sort of accomplish that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of, I think it does sort of come to you when you're ready in a lot of ways. And I think with the same thing happened for you. I had another question. Can you like when you read Seven Daughters of Dupree now, first of all, do you read it? Second of all, can you see it? Can you, when you write something for such a long time, you sort of lose the thread a bit and you can't tell if it's good. You can't tell if you like it anymore. What's your relationship with your book right now?
It's a little distant. The last time I read it was when I got the bound manuscript. And so I want to say that might have been November, December of 2024. Reading it for me, I remember writing it, but it also feels like a fever dream just because there was so much happening in my life at the time. I remember getting an email from our UK team because we have the US and the UK deal. Thank you, Peter. And Lucy over at Curtis Brown. But I remember getting an email from the UK team, and it's the assets for, I think, the galley, but it might be the hardcover. And on the back, they have like a quick sentence from the book. And I know it's from like one of the final three chapters with the character who no one knows her name. And reading it and seeing it excerpted and like standing out like that, I was like, I wrote that. And I was like, I guess I did. And so it's a distant kind of relationship. I can think more about the process of writing it and how the story came to me and how I put it together, like the craft of it. But sometimes I can reading it, I'm like, damn, I was on one, or like I was really in my bag, but it doesn't seem real almost. I don't know if that makes sense or I'm explaining it right. Like I can
Yeah, no, I
like
get that.
I can see the characters. I remember hearing their voices, seeing them in my mind, writing their stories and really crafting it. But when I go back to read it as like a reader and not the author, it's like, oh, this is really good. Like I get the feeling like, okay, I really did have something. It wasn't just in my mind because for a while it was like, I don't know if I have it. Like I don't know if this is the book that's going to do what I've always wanted to do. And then also it being in my mind that, if this doesn't work, if, trying to get the agent or going on submission, because I had gotten to the submission place before with my first self-published novel, it was always in my mind, you can always do this yourself. Not that I wanted to, but like that's how I was like tempering my own expectations. And so now that we're here, it's like, no, 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 this is really happening. And it feels very, very surreal.
Yeah, and I think time helps with fiction, like being able to see it, like time passing, you can sort of see things with fresh eyes, and it's kind of cool what time does to the writer and to their own material. And that was also another thing that I forgot to say was very impressive with you that you were like, I love that you had published other books and you didn't wait for anyone. You were like, I'm going to do this myself. And I just found that incredibly impressive and just made me want to work with you even more because there was a sort of a nothing's going to stop me vibe to you, and I want to work with people like that, you know? And it just made me feel that much more excited about working with you.
That is a very accurate description of me. So that's a question I have because you hear debates in literary social media communities about if you have self-published books, then that can look bad on you in the eyes of editors or agents, or if you don't have a social media following, just all these things from people who really don't know. So what is it that writers should know when they're approaching agents, whether they have a bunch of publications behind them or none?
I think that for fiction, we're talking about fiction here.
Yeah.
For fiction, the social media stuff doesn't really matter very much. Like social media and platform and those sort of buzzwords apply much more to nonfiction. So if you're a fiction writer listening to this, I wouldn't worry so much about your social media. You worry about writing a great book because that sort of like supersedes everything else. That's the most important thing. And also like going from like 1,000 followers, on Instagram to 1,500, like it's not going to matter to the publisher. It's small numbers because they're dealing with celebrities that, have millions of people. So I wouldn't worry about the social media aspect of it or the platform. I do think publications are good. Like if you can get short stories in journals or pieces somewhere, even if you're a fiction writer and you're writing nonfiction pieces for outlets, it just shows the agent that you're sort of out there, getting rejected. And I like that because then I know you've been rejected and you know what rejection is like. So we're sort of simpatico, and like, because of my job, it sounds on the surface that like agenting is all sexy and fun, but like I'm being rejected constantly. Like it's, even these huge books that we sell or huge successes, everyone should know that like I submitted to 20 editors, 17 of those editors pass. So I'm getting like multiple passes a day. Like basically publishing is a chain of passes. Like the boss passes on the editor passes on me, I pass on the writer. But then you have success within that, so that's sort of an important aspect. And then the other part of your question was about self-publishing. I think there used to be a stigma against writers if they had self-published their books, and it was sort of looked upon in a negative way. That has completely gone away. Like now, it's almost a plus that you've self-published, that you have other books out there, because I think it's mainly because a lot has to do with Amazon in the sense that you can sell your book. And there's lots of clients that I've taken on who have self-published their book to great success. I mean, I just did a huge book called Inner Excellence that was in the Super Bowl last year. And, AJ Brown was reading on the sidelines. I'm sure many people know the story. And that was self-published. And that, was an extraordinary deal I did at the beginning of the year. I have a YA book called Nightweaver that was also self-published, and I saw the woman on a local news station in Texas, and I reached out, and it was fantastic, and resold it to Little Brown. So that happens all the time. So the stigma of self-publishing is long gone.
This is very validating for my 2017 self when I self-published my first novel and then reached out to all of my friends who worked in television, asking them if I could come on their morning show or their newscast when they got to the fluff part of the newscast and talk about my book, and to all of them who said yes. To the agent that I now have who was watching local television and picked up an author from one of those interviews. Oh, this has been a joy. Thank you so much, Peter, for joining me. Any last words that you want to say?
I wouldn't be your agent if I didn't say, like, please buy Nikesha's book. It's extraordinary. It's called The Seven Daughters of Dupree. It's like one of my favorite novels I've worked on in my career, and I guarantee you will love it.
All right, you heard Peter. If you haven't pre-ordered The Seven Daughters of Dupree, please do. I'm 2 weeks out from publication. All pre-orders count toward first week sales, which do factor into the bestseller list, which I hope to make. But on a more serious note, pre-orders signal to a publisher real interest in a book, which may then determine support as well as an author's longevity and sustainability. So again, please pre-order The Seven Daughters of Dupree. If you order from Mahogany Books, you can get a signed copy of the novel for the first 200 and 10% off your first purchase using the code BLACKPUB at checkout. That's BLKPUB. And don't forget, you can also see me on tour. It kicks off January 24th, 2026 in Jacksonville, Florida, where I live. You can find information about the tour, dates, locations, and time on my website, www.newrights.com. And Rights is WRITES. Or on my Instagram or Threads page at Nikesha_Elise. That's our show for the week. If you like this episode and want more Black and Published, head to our Instagram page. It's at Black and Published, and that's BLK and Published. There, I've posted a bonus clip from my interview with Peter about the difficulty in navigating both sides of the industry between authors and editors. Make sure you check it out and let me know what you think in the comments. I'll holler at y'all next week when our guest will be my editor, Allison Callahan.
The work is the author's. It's not mine. I didn't write it. It's my job to come in and take what you, the author, or the other authors that I've worked with, has written and just make it as strong as it can possibly be. If I've done a good job, no one will ever know I was there.
I'll talk to you then. Peace.
What's going on, family? This is Derek Young
and Ramonda Young,
owners of both Mahogany Books and the Mahogany Books Podcast Network.
We really want to thank each and every one of you for listening to this episode. And if you enjoyed what you just heard, drop us a review and rate us on whatever platform you download podcasts on.
We truly appreciate each and every one of you for supporting us and making us your go-to for Black books. And we look forward to connecting with you all sometime in the future.
Thank you again, fam. And always remember, Black books matter.